Okay guys, we're on our new series on the four angels message, and we're going to start with the first angel in this video, in this presentation. Now, when you wonder, okay, who are the four angels, let's just go real quick and explain. And Revelation chapter 14, as we talked about in previous videos, but when the Lamb is on Mount Zion, there's 144,000, and then there's four angels. I saw another angel flying in the midst of the heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell upon the earth, every nation, kindred, and tongue, and people, saying, Fear God, give glory to him, for the hour's judgments come. Worship him that made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. So that is what we're talking about in this first video, is this first angel. Now, that's the first one. We can see a particular order here in Revelation 14. The second one, the second angel says, Babylon is fallen. The third angel talks about the mark of the beast. The fourth angel talks about the patience of the saints that keep the commandments of God. Okay, and blessed are they that die in the Lord from henceforth. Okay, so that's the fourth angel. Then we have the angel of the covenant. So that's Revelation 14. Okay, so in Revelation 14, we see their order. All right, now the whole book of Revelation has these order of four angels, okay? And we're going to look at the angels, the four angels, not all in this video. We're just doing number one. But then they precede Revelation 14. So between Revelation 7 and Revelation 12, we have, once again, another four angels, okay? And then we see them in Revelation 14 and then afterwards as well. But this first one is the most detailed information we have on the first angel by comparing the book of Ezekiel with Revelation. Okay? It's when we do that that we really understand what's going on. Okay? Because what's going on is within the angelic host, within the angelic ranks, are very, very significant details and things that happen here. And we're going to try and convey those to you. We're going to try and explain these deep mysteries. So let's get started with the Lamb. So when the Lamb comes in Revelation 6, in verse 16, it says, it talks about the face of him that sits upon the throne and the wrath of the Lamb. Okay, so this is, in Greek, face there can also be the person of him. So we have the person of the Lamb sitting upon a throne. And then immediately after these things, John says, I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth. Okay? Then in verse 2, I saw another angel ascending from the east sun, having the seal of the living God. Now this angel here is the first angel. Okay? The same one we saw before that said, Fear God, give glory to him, worship him. Okay, so this angel deals with worship, as we'll see. Okay? So we see him there. Now let's pick up where he continues in Revelation chapter 8, verse 3. Another angel stood at the altar. Okay, another angel stood at the altar. So when this angel, we can see this is the reenactment of all the things that you see in the priesthood. Okay, with Moses, we have two altars here. This is a altar, the brazen altar, the altar of sacrifice, if you will. And then there's another altar called the altar of incense. And on it has four horns. Actually, this one has four horns as well. But this one is called the altar of incense. And what the high priest would do is he would go outside of the temple or the tabernacle. This is Moses. It doesn't matter. The same thing is the same. And you would take a coal from the altar that's outside the tabernacle, outside the temple. You would take the coals from that altar. You would put incense, and that would cause incense to rise on a golden censer. That's what this is, okay? And then you would bring that into the holy place. That's where the altar of incense is. Okay, so you go through one door of the temple, you go one veil of the tabernacle, you enter the holy place. Then there's Yom Kippur, and what Yom Kippur is the one day that the high priest could take the incense, take the coals, not only on the holy place, but then he could go into the Holy of Holies. Then he could go into the Holy of Holies and he could bring that incense before the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? So what we see here is the same thing. Revelation 8. So an angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer. So he's standing at the altar, and he has a golden censer. Okay, so he has a golden censer in his hand, and what he's doing is he's taking the coals, like we showed you. He's taking the coals from the altar with the golden censer. An angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer, and there was giving to him much incense that he should offer it with the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar. Okay, so you have this altar, and then you have the golden altar, so that he would offer the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar, the altar of incense before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended before God out of the angel's hand. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. You have the coals, you have the altar, you have the golden censer, you have the golden altar or the altar of incense. And the prayers of the saints accompany this. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with coals, with fire from the altar. So he takes the coals, he takes the fire from the altar, okay, and then and he casts it to the earth. So then he casts this to the earth, and when he cast it to the earth, there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and a great earthquake. Okay? So that is what we can see the angel doing in Revelation chapter 8. Okay, chapter 8, we can see that. But we also could see him with the seal of God. Okay, now these are brief descriptions here in the book of Revelation that we get much more detail, and this is how we know this is the same person. The angel with the seal and the angel that's at the altar. So when we go to Ezekiel chapter 9, okay, now when we're here at Ezekiel chapter 9, now keep in mind, guys, what we're going to go over, we're going to look at Ezekiel chapter 9 and Ezekiel chapter 10. Okay, we do have a whole playlist on the book of Ezekiel, but I don't want you to lose sight of the significance of this teaching, because it's not just simple things, okay, the priest is doing this, the angel is doing this. This is live, okay? And there's going to be more things that can actually manifest as a result of this. I'll give you an example. When we're here in Ezekiel 9, it's Ezekiel chapter 8 where I showed you the synagogue underground. Okay, so if you read that whole chapter, you can see we have a whole teaching on that, on the third temple underground by the western wall. Okay, so that is the synagogue of Satan. We have told you that clearly. Okay, so that is something that manifests physically, that we physically can see as a sign. Because many of these things are types and shadows. They're symbolisms of angels, symbolisms of cherubim, of wheels, of difficult to understand spiritual concepts, which we understand, okay? Yet they are very, very profound and very, very significant. So I hope you don't lose sight of the fact that we have actually been part of releasing this information in the book of Ezekiel for some time. Okay, so when we get to Ezekiel chapter 9, it's after that whole synagogue scene underground, and he sees the whole thing. Okay, so I encourage you to read it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, most of you do, the underground synagogue. But verse 1 says, "And he cried in my ears with a loud voice, saying, Cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate towards the north. Okay? So 6 men come from the higher gate from the north. Okay? Now these 6 men represent the first 6 seals. Okay? Because let's remember when we read from Revelation and we saw the throne, that throne in Revelation 6:16 comes at the 6th seal. Because Revelation 6:12 says, when he had opened the 6th seal. Okay, and the prophecy continues, and we see the throne of the Lamb. Okay? So here we have 6 men with weapons in their hands. Okay? These 6 men represent the first 6 seals that have already taken place and transpired. And every one with a slaughter weapon in his hand, okay, or battle axe. Every one among them, and then there was one among them clothed with linen. Okay? So we have a 7th man. Okay, a 7th. And this is the angel that we're talking about in this video. This man clothed in linen with a writer's inkhorn by his side, and he went in and stood by the altar. Okay, remember how we saw the other angel? He went and he stood by the altar. So the same thing, you see this man, he's clothed in white linen. He stands by the altar. He's the 7th, okay, representing the 7th seal, representing the one with the seal of the living God, just like we saw in Revelation. So he stands by the altar, okay? With the writer's inkhorn by his side. So the writer's inkhorn is a pen or a way of marking, okay? And he uses like a pen to mark the people. He stood by the brazen, and the glory of God of Israel was gone up from the cherubim where he was at the threshold of the house. Okay, so now what's happened is this whole scene is in the spirit, but is in now Ezekiel's temple. And the glory of God had gone up from the cherub, okay, to the threshold of the house, and he called to the man clothed in linen with the writer's inkhorn by his side, and the angel said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for the abominations that are done in the city. Okay? So, this, our angel here, this man clothed fine linen, is to go through the city, to go to the midst of Jerusalem, and look for those, and set a mark on their forehead. Okay, this mark is, what this mark is this is a tav. Okay, so he's setting a mark on the forehead. And of those that sigh and cry for the abominations. Okay, so he's marking them. But remember, it's the same thing we saw in Revelation. When he took the golden censer, it had the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar. And the smoke rose, and the smoke came before God. So here we see the same thing. This angel is going forth, and he's looking for those that is like the prayers of the saints, the incense that's rising. And then what is he doing? He's taking a golden ink, and he's marking the forehead of them. Okay? So these are the prayers of the saints. So it's not just any prayers that it's talking about in Revelation. These are the prayers of the saints. Okay? And he set a mark upon the foreheads of them that cry for the abomination. And he said to the others in my hearing, go through the city and smite, and spare not, neither have pity, but slay both old and young, maids, little children, and women. But come not near any man that has the mark, and begin at the sanctuary. And they began with the ancient men that were before the house. Okay? So here you can see that this is the angel with the seal of God. Okay? And so it is at the time of the sixth seal, going into the seventh seal, okay, of this angel, that the seal of God takes place. So yes, this is telling us that the seal of God, or the sealing of these people, has taken place. Now, it says, come not near to any man who has the mark. Okay? So the plagues of the 6 men with the weapons going throughout, okay, they are not to touch those with the seal of God. This, of course, is exactly what we see in Revelation chapter 9, where we see the locusts are not to touch those with the seal of God. So everything you can see in Ezekiel matches perfectly with Revelation. So now we can see in Revelation, when it's talking about the prayers of the saints, what are the prayers of the saints? It's those that sigh, those that cry out for the abominations of the people, those grieved with the wickedness of the people. Okay? Those are the prayers of the saints. Ezekiel is telling us that specifically. Okay? So we're going to go through this in a few ways. All right? So these are the 6 seals. Okay? Now, let's remember in Revelation, there were 4 angels standing. Okay? We had the 6th seal. We have the person of him sitting upon the throne. Then we have 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth. Then verse 11 gives us these living creatures. Okay, so what is this? What is this talking about in Revelation chapter 7? Well, it's very clear right here in Ezekiel chapter 10. In Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 1, I looked and behold, in the firmament that was above the heads of the cherubim, there was over them a sapphire stone like the appearance of the likeness of a throne. Okay, so just like we saw the Lamb's throne in Revelation, here you have the throne. Okay, in Ezekiel 10, verse 1. And he spake to the man clothed in linen and said, go between the wheels and under the cherubim and fill your hand with coals of fire. Okay, fill your hand with coals of fire. Remember we did that before. Fill your hand with the coals. These are not hot, fortunately. Okay, fill your hands with the coals of fire from between the cherubim and scatter them over the city. And he went in my sight. So what we can see here in Ezekiel chapter 10 is we see the same angel doing the same thing that we saw in Revelation. Okay, so what we can see is that here he's literally in the temple. In Revelation, there literally is a temple and the throne because you have the altars there. Okay, and what it's doing is it's showing us, it's giving us more insight, more revelation, more understanding of what is going on. Okay, and so what happens? The cherubim stood at the right side of the house. Now, if we go back to Ezekiel 9, verse 2, you can see at the higher gate, which is towards the north. So this is positioning us towards the north. So if we're in the north and we look, okay, facing north, and we go to the right of the temple, okay, that's going to show us the altar, okay, and it's the altar that's in the inner court. So the cherubim stood on the right side of the house. So the right side of the house is the altar. And the man went in, the man clothed with white linen went in, and a cloud filled the inner court. So this is the inner court. And the glory of Yahweh filled up from the cherubim and stood over the threshold of the house. So the threshold of the house is the inner court, is the area in the right before the temple. So let's just look and show you an illustration of what the temple is showing. So here we are. This is the temple here. This is the Holy of Holies. This is the holy place. This is the porch. And this is the altar. So the temple is positioned to the east. But if we're looking to the north and facing north, which is this way, then the right side of the temple would be the altar. So the altar is right here. So what we're looking at is that the living creatures in the wheels are in and around the altar. So that what happens is the cherubim then reaches inside and gets the coals from off the altar, and they hand it to the man clothed in white linen. And then they cast them to the earth. So this is the area of the inner court, everything you're looking at here. And what we can also see is that there are gates to the inner court. Okay, this is the east gate, this is the north gate, and then this is the south gate, and then this is the temple, and you can see that they form the same orientation and order as the cherubim themselves. We get that in the screen. Now, to further explain what's happening with the four angels standing and the four wheels and the four cherubim, we have our kind of crude drawing, okay? And it says that there's a firmament or a rainbow, and then there's a throne like sapphire. Remember how we read that? Okay. Then we have four angels standing, and at the top of their wings and above their heads is a throne. Then there's four wheels. Each has four wheels. Okay? So what we're looking at is that in the middle of the wheels, in the middle of the cherubim, is the altar. So that would be in this area. So then the cherubim goes in, takes the coals of the altar, gives it to the man clothed in white linen. Now, you can see that everything that we see that is an angel or is living is always something in creation. That's why we have these looking like planets, okay? Because they're called wheels within the wheels. And in the Hebrew, there's two words for wheels. In the English, your King James most will just say the word wheels, but there's one word for ophan, or plural, ophanim. Okay, and that's an angel. And then there's another word for wheel, which is galgal. Okay, that's why it's two parts to it. So it's just like a wheel within a wheel, a planet with a ring around it. Okay, because these are not tires or things like on a car or anything. That's not something in creation, but planets are. Okay, so that's why we have drawn them this way. Back to Ezekiel 10, verse 6. And it came to pass that when he had commanded the man clothed with white linen, saying, take fire between the wheels, between the cherubims, and he went in and stood beside the wheels. So he stood beside the wheels, and again, he's given these coals to cast, over the city. All right? So he stood beside the wheels, and one cherub stretched out his hand from between the cherubims unto the fire that was before the cherubims. Okay, because remember the cherubims are surrounding the altar. They're going around the altar. And when the cherubim goes in, he takes the fire and took it and put it into the hands of the man clothed in linen, and he took it and he went out. Okay? And remember, he was instructed to scatter them over the city. Okay? So he scatters them over the city, and we could see that the scattering over the city is what we saw in Revelation when the angel took the censer and cast the coals, cast the fire to the earth. Then began the seven trumpets. Okay, so the seven trumpets of Revelation happen as a result of the first angel, clothed in white linen, casting fire to the earth, thus beginning the trumpet judgments in Revelation chapter 8. Okay? But let's look at the wheels, because then he says, there appeared in the cherubims the form of a man's hand under their wings. And when I look, behold, the four wheels by the cherubim, one wheel by one cherub, and another wheel by another cherub. Now there's different words in Hebrew here, as we mentioned. There's ophanim and galgal. Okay? And the appearance of the wheels was the color of beryl stone. In their appearances, they had one likeness, and a wheel had to be in the midst of a wheel. And when they went upon their four sides, and they turned not as they went. So they went on their four sides, so that's something round. And they turned not as they went, but the place where they the head looked, they followed it. And they turned not and they went. So the whole thing of the cherubim standing, of the wheels, is one moving, cohesive structure. And their whole body and their backs and their hands and their wings and the wheels were all filled with eyes. Even the wheels, they had 4. And as for the wheels, it was cried unto me in my hearing, O wheel. Okay, so as for the Ophanim, it was cried in my hearing, Galgal. Okay? And every one had 4 faces, the first face of a cherub, the second face of a man, the third face of a lion, the fourth face of an eagle, and the cherubims lifted up, as it were, the living creatures that I saw by the river Cherub. And the cherubims went, and the wheels with them. Okay? Then, verse 19, the cherubims lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in their sight, and when they went up with the wheels by their side, they stood every one at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house. So the east gate of the Lord, so they're standing at the door of the east gate, okay, of the Lord's house. So so that's the door, the entrance into the temple. So they're now at the door of the east gate. Now, if we go to the next chapter, Ezekiel 11 and verse 22, then did the cherubims lift up their wings and the wheels beside them, and the glory of the God of Israel was over above them. And the glory of God went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain which is on the east side of the city. So the mountain on the east side of the city is the Mount of Olives. Okay? So the cherubim, the wheels, this is the throne. The Son of Man, you could see the Lamb's throne. This is how he's going to come. He's coming in the clouds. When he comes in the clouds, this is his throne. Okay? And after he comes in the clouds, then later his feet are going to land on the Mount of Olives. Okay? So that's what this is describing. In the future, when Christ, it said the place of the soles of his feet will land on the Mount of Olives. So that's what this is here. Then later in Ezekiel, it describes him going from the way of the east, okay, from the Mount of Olives, coming from the way of the east, going into Ezekiel's temple. Okay? Now, it's a lot of information. We do have notes on this. So let's take a look at the notes and do a summary. Okay, so from Revelation 6:1, we see the 4 living creatures, and then verse 12, we see the 6th seal. Then we see the person of him that sits upon the throne and the wrath of the Lamb. Then we see 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth. And then we see around the throne, verse 11 of Revelation 7, the 4 living creatures. So we can understand that the 6th seal is thus the 6 men in Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 1, having charge over the city to draw near with their battle axe. Then in Ezekiel 10:1, we see the firmament above the head of the cherubims was a sapphire throne. So, okay, this is the same throne, and thus we have the 4 angels standing, okay, are the cherubim, and they have the face of a cherub, a man, a lion, an eagle, and they stood on the right side of the house. Okay, we know that they're standing there is by the altar. And they have 4 wheels by the cherubim of the color of beryl stone. The wheels are the Ophanim. So these are the 2 words we were explaining. The Ophanim, okay, is one word for wheels, and then they're also called Galgal. Okay, Galgal, in my hearing. Okay, so these 4 wheels are what the 4 winds are. So we have 4 angels standing. These are the 4 cherubims. We have the 4 winds in Revelation 7. These are the 4 wheels. Then, back to Ezekiel 9, verse 2, 1 man, now he's the 7th. So we had 6 men, and then the 7th is the man clothed with linen with a writer's inkhorn, or it can be called a scroll case, by his side. Okay, so this is clearly the angel that ascends from the east having the seal of the living God, because that's in Revelation 7:2. So now we get to the information regarding the seal. Okay, so the reason it's an important distinction here is that some translations will say an inkhorn, or something you can write with. Some call it a scroll case. if it's a scroll case, it's a list of names, okay? And then the list of names, we see the 12 tribes. So this is another way we are represented this by the 144,000. So you have the 12 tribes, you have the 4 angels standing, and the 4 wheels, okay? And you can see each is 12,000. So yes, the only people on the face of the earth that meet the qualifications to receive that mark, okay, is 144,000. That's the ones that receive the seal of living God, okay? And they set a mark, a tau, okay, and that's a tav, vav, okay? Now a tav is the name of the aleph in the tav, okay? So you can see here, here's an aleph, tav. So when Christ calls himself Alpha and Omega, that's in Greek. Alpha, Omega, the first and last, okay? In Hebrew, that's an aleph, the first letter, and a tav, a last letter. So these people receive the mark of his name. That's what the tav is. So they receive the mark of his name on their foreheads of those that sigh and cry for the abominations in the city, okay? So we also see that in Revelation 14 because they have the name of him and the Father's name on their foreheads, okay? So this information in Ezekiel is very clear for us to understanding what's happening in Revelation. Because what are the prayers of the saints? Now we can see, because they're the ones with the weapons, they're commanded, go through the city and smite, okay? And what they stood by the altar. Then in Revelation 8:3, the angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, much incense offer the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar before the throne, okay? And that angel took the censer and filled it with fire from off the altar and cast it to the earth. Then we have the 7 trumpets. And when the fire was cast to the earth, there were voices, thunderings, lightning, and a earthquake, okay? So then, if we go back to Ezekiel 10, we saw the man clothed with linen go between the wheels and under the cherubim fill his hands with the coals of the fire, and he scattered it upon the city. And the cherubim stood on the right side of the house. So they're facing north on the right side of the house, which is over the altar, or by the altar. And when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court. So that's the altar that has the inner court. And the cherub put forth his hand into the fire, and it was given between the cherubim to put into the hands of the man clothed with light linen. Okay? And so he did that. And the cherub lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth, and the wheels stood at the door of the east gate. Now this relates to Revelation 11:19, where the temple of God is open in heaven, and inside the temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant. So that happens at the 7th trumpet. Okay, the 7th trumpet is what this is talking about here. The cherubim lift up their wings and mounted up from the earth and stood at the door of the east gate. So this is the Son of Man, or the cherubims are standing in preparation for the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Okay, and the cherubim and the wheels, the Ophanim, went up from the city and stood on the Mount of Olives. So then in Ezekiel 11:23, the cherubim and the wheels, they go over onto the Mount of Olives. If you read it technically, it says the mountain to the east of the city, but we know that to be the Mount of Olives. And what this is preparation for when Christ will come and his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. You read that in Zechariah 14. And from there, he will then go, Ezekiel 43:2, the glory of the God of Israel came from the east and came into the temple. Okay, so this glory in these cherubim is his moving throne. It's his vehicle, okay? And so that is what we can see with the operation of the first angel. Okay, the first angel, and the first angel is showing us that he seals at the 7th seal, okay? He's showing us of the release of the information on the coals of fire, okay, and those that are written in the book. So guys, thanks for watching. This is part of a new playlist called The 7 Thunders, okay? And in it, we're going to go over each of the prophecies of the angels, of the 4 angels. This is the first angel, and then we'll go over the others as well. So, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. Worship him that made the heavens, the earth, the seas, and the fountains of waters. Amen.